Caribbean Sea, July 2025. The USS Chosin, CG-65, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser on Freedom of Navigation patrol, steams 60 nautical miles off La Guaira. At 0214 local, two Venezuelan Air Force F-16C Block 70s, call signs Aguila 1 and Aguila 2, rise from Libertador Air Base with live PL-12 missiles. What follows is 20 minutes of lightning-fast naval air combat, a kill zone in international waters where Aegis, missiles, and raw nerve collide. Chosin's SP-1B radar paints the F-16s at 180 miles. Combat Information Center lights up red. "Vampire! Vampire!" echoes through the ship. The Venezuelans fire first. 4 PL-12s streak across the horizon, Mach 4, 70-mile range. Chosin's captain slams the alarm. The cruiser heels hard to port, chaff and decoy flares blooming like fireworks. 2 missiles lose lock and spiral into the sea. The third detonates 200 meters off the starboard beam, shrapnel pinging the hull. The fourth slams into the forward phalanx mount. The CIWS erupts in a magnesium-white inferno, radar dish shredded, crew screaming below decks. Chosin answers with teeth. SM-6 missiles roar from VLS cells, 4 birds in 8 seconds. The F-16s break hard, dumping flares, but the SM-6s climb to 80,000 feet, then dive like hawks. Aguila 1 explodes mid-turn, fuel tanks rupturing into a fireball that lights the clouds orange. Aguila 2 evades the first two, but the third SM-6 clips its wing. The jet spirals, pilot ejecting over open water. A Seahawk helicopter from Chosin's deck launches, miniguns chewing the parachute lines. The pilot disappears beneath the waves. 3 Venezuelan SAR-6 corvettes, Tamanaco, Guaycapuro, Yaracay, surge from La Guaira at 35 knots, C-802 anti-ship missiles hot. Chosin's SSM batteries ripple fire, 32 missiles in 20 seconds. The sky becomes a lattice of white contrails. Tamanaco takes 3 hits amidships. The bridge vanishes in a fireball, the ship listing hard. Guaycapuro launches its C-802s, but Chosin's Nulka decoys seduce them into the sea. A harpoon from Chosin's deck launcher answers. Guaycapuro splits in half, both sections sinking in flames. Yaracay closes to 12 miles, desperate. Its 76mm gun opens up. Shells stitch the water around Chosin, one round punching through the helicopter hangar, igniting aviation fuel. Flames lick the flight deck. Chosin's 5-inch gun swivels, rapid-fire HEVT rounds walking up Yaracay's hull. The corvette's magazine detonates. A mushroom cloud rises, debris raining for miles. Venezuelan radio chatter fractures into panic. "Abortin! Abortin!" Chosin's damage control teams battle the hangar fire, foam and seawater hissing on molten steel. 20 minutes after the first missile, the Caribbean is calm again. Chosin steams on, scorched but afloat. Phalanx mount a twisted ruin, hangar blackened. 2 F-16s and 3 corvettes lie on the seabed, oil slicks burning like funeral pyres. A Reaper drone orbits overhead, live-streaming the aftermath via satellite. Pentagon frequencies crackle. Chosin victorious, 0 U.S. fatalities, Venezuelan squadron erased. The cruiser's bow cuts the dawn, a scarred predator still hunting. The message is carved in fire and steel. The Caribbean belongs to no cartel, no rogue air force.
The Caribbean has long been a flashpoint for U.S.-Venezuela tensions, with U.S. submarines patrolling to protect oil interests, while Venezuela responds with bold naval actions. Undersea confrontations often spark controversy, leading to unexpected escalations. In 2025, a U.S. submarine surfacing dangerously close to Venezuela's coast ignited a fierce confrontation, shaking the region and shocking the world. Below is the account of this clash, from a daring undersea maneuver to an unforeseen outcome that stunned everyone. On a stormy evening in 2025, the U.S. Navy submarine USS Virginia surfaced just a few hundred meters off Venezuela's coast, its radar sweeping for threats. A nearby Venezuelan patrol vessel detected it, broadcasting urgent demands for the submarine to withdraw. The Virginia held its position, searchlights piercing the rain. Tension crackled as Venezuelan sailors aimed weapons. Suddenly, the Venezuelan vessel fired an anti-submarine missile, the projectile streaking through the air and striking the Virginia's hull, triggering a massive explosion that rocked the deck and sent a towering water column skyward. Alarms blared, black smoke billowed, transforming the Caribbean into a powder keg, ready to erupt with devastating force.
The attack sparked a ferocious U.S. response. FA-18 jets from a nearby U.S. carrier roared in, engaging Venezuelan fighter jets in a whirlwind dogfight over the Caribbean sky. Missiles streaked through the air, a Venezuela jet exploding in a brilliant fireball that lit the horizon. The Virginia launched cruise missiles, tearing through the Venezuelan vessel's deck in a sprawling blaze. Venezuela retaliated with anti-ship missiles, one striking a U.S. escort ship, sending water and metal skyward. Smoke and flames spread, relentless explosions churning the sea, turning the Caribbean into a chaotic war zone where every wave carried death.
The conflict surged into space with terrifying speed. Venezuela used jamming satellites to disrupt U.S. aircraft control systems. The U.S. countered with anti-satellite weapons, destroying a Venezuelan satellite, sending orbital debris cascading like a meteor shower. In the skies, combat drones from both sides clashed, bursting into fireballs that illuminated the night. Venezuelan hypersonic missiles targeted U.S. ships, but U.S. laser defense systems shot them down in dazzling beams of light. The war expanded as allies joined, turning the Caribbean into a multinational flashpoint where missiles and black smoke shrouded everything. The standoff drew in regional forces as Cuban and Nicaraguan ships rushed to support Venezuela, guns blazing in a multinational melee. U.S. destroyers arrived, their Tomahawk missiles obliterating Venezuelan coastal batteries in earth-shaking blasts. A Venezuelan submarine surfaced, launching torpedoes that rocked a U.S. frigate, debris flying in the blast. Coast Guard teams boarded Venezuelan vessels, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat on pitching decks. Flames spread as spilled oil ignited, engulfing coastal villages. Satellite imagery showed the Caribbean ablaze, marking a savage phase of warfare that engulfed the region.
The attack's fallout triggered a global sanctions crisis as nations condemned Venezuela, imposing bans that crippled its economy. Oil exports halted, causing shortages that rocked global markets. An international coalition formed to enforce blockades, but Venezuela-backed hackers disrupted global banking, freezing assets in retaliation. Relief ships faced pirate attacks, with cargo looted in the chaos. The U.S. led a multinational effort to restore maritime security, but rogue factions emerged, blending state and criminal actions. The crisis paused major warfare, but a fractured economy and persistent threats signaled an unstable future.
The Ukraine-Russia war has spread to rail lines, with Ukraine using drones to sever Russian military logistics. Russia guards its weapons trains with mobile air defenses, while Ukraine exploits transition windows. In 2025, a Ukrainian drone attack on a Russian train unleashed chaos, triggering a chain of events that reshaped the conflict. Below is the account of this confrontation, from an explosion on the tracks to an unforeseen outcome that horrified the world. On a foggy night in 2025, a Russian missile train thundered through Kursk. Ukrainian drones armed with precision-guided bombs targeted the munitions cars. Russian radar detected them too late. The drones dived like birds of prey, the first explosion ripping the middle car apart and chaining to others in a relentless cascade. Rails twisted like snakes, fire erupting into a colossal fireball, debris flying like a metal storm. Russian soldiers leapt from the train in panic, black smoke choking the sky. Alarms wailed across the region, rescue crews rushed in, but the train was already a burning wreck. The battlefield became a railway inferno, igniting a brutal logistics war. Russia struck back immediately, artillery from the border pounding Ukrainian positions in Sumy, shells shaking the earth. Russian Su-35 jets roared in, dropping bombs on Ukrainian supply depots. Ukraine countered with anti-radar missiles, destroying Russian air defense stations near the border. A ferocious air battle erupted, jets clashing in deadly pursuits amid smoke and fire. Relentless explosions lit the sky, turning the region into a chaotic war zone where every second pulsed with danger.
The conflict surged into chemical warfare with terrifying speed. Russia launched missiles carrying toxic gas into Ukrainian positions, clouds of poison spreading and paralyzing soldiers. Ukraine retaliated with drones dispersing nerve agents, striking Russian convoys near the border. Cyber attacks crippled military ventilation systems, Russian hackers exposing Ukrainian positions, while Ukraine seized control of Russian chemical depots. On the ground, troops from both sides collapsed in agony, AI drones colliding and bursting into chemical fireballs. The war expanded as allies joined, turning the border into a multi-layered death zone. Russia launched a massive ground offensive, tanks rolling to seize Ukrainian rail hubs. Ferocious urban battles erupted in Kharkiv, buildings collapsing under fire. Ukraine ambushed with remote mines, incinerating Russian armor. A massive chemical explosion destroyed a weapons depot, contaminating rivers and displacing thousands. Neighboring nations were drawn in, Poland reinforcing its borders. The global economy reeled as rail lines were severed, satellite imagery showing vast regions shrouded in toxic smoke, marking a savage phase of warfare. The attack's fallout triggered a global environmental crisis. Toxins spread, poisoning soil and water, killing wildlife and crops en masse. Contaminated rivers flowed into Europe, causing food shortages as harvests failed. The US and EU organized emergency aid, but insurgent groups exploited the chaos to rise. Autonomous robots cleared contaminated zones, relief convoys delivering supplies under fire. Russia and Ukraine were forced into a temporary ceasefire due to the ecological disaster, but new rebel factions emerged. The crisis paused the war, but persistent pollution and famine signaled an unstable future.
The Ukraine-Russia war has entered the blind eye phase. Ukraine targets Russia's strategic radars to cripple its air defense network. The Voronezh M radar at Armavir, Russia's biggest eye, became the ultimate prize. In 2025, a Ukrainian drone strike shook Russia's defenses, unleashing a chain of horrifying events. Below is the account, from the explosion on the radar hill to an outcome that left the world breathless. On a foggy night in 2025, the 50-meter-tall Voronezh radar towered over Armavir's hill. A swarm of Ukrainian drones armed with armor-piercing warheads flew low, evading defenses and slamming into the antenna tower. The first blast tore through the steel frame, shockwaves rippling hundreds of meters, the antenna collapsing like an ancient tree struck by lightning. Debris rained like metal hail, fire erupting into a colossal fireball, black smoke choking the night sky. Russian troops fled bunkers in panic, alarms screaming. The radar went blind in seconds, a vast airspace left without warning. Russia struck back instantly. Kinzhal missiles from MiG-31Ks streaked across the sky, obliterating Ukrainian drone bases in Zaporizhia. Su-57 jets flew low, dropping guided bombs on supply depots. Ukraine countered with Storm Shadow missiles, destroying a replacement radar station in Rostov. A ferocious air battle erupted, jets clashing amid missile fire, a Su-57 exploding mid-air. Black smoke and debris fell like rain, turning the border into a chaotic war zone where every second was life or death. The conflict surged into biological warfare with terrifying speed. Russia launched missiles carrying genetically modified viruses into Ukrainian bases, pathogens spreading rapidly and paralyzing troops. Ukraine retaliated with drones, dispersing metal-eating bacteria, striking Russian missile depots. Russian hackers leaked Ukrainian medical data, while Ukraine seized control of Russian biolabs. On the ground, soldiers collapsed in agony, AI drones colliding and bursting into biological fireballs. The war expanded as NATO intervened, turning the border into a multi-layered death zone. Russia launched a massive ground offensive, T-14 Armata tanks rolling to seize Ukrainian cities. Ferocious urban battles erupted in Kharkiv, buildings crumbling under fire. Ukraine ambushed with suicide drones, incinerating Russian armor. A massive biological explosion destroyed a weapons depot, contaminating soil and displacing millions. Neighboring nations were drawn in, Poland invoking NATO's Article 5.
Satellite imagery showed vast regions shrouded in biological haze, marking an unprecedented phase of savage warfare. The fallout triggered a global alliance crisis. NATO fractured as some members refused to fight, sparking violent protests across Europe. Russia and China formed a new bloc, threatening to cut gas supplies. The US and EU convened emergency summits, but biological insurgents rose from the chaos. Autonomous robots cleared contaminated zones, relief convoys delivering supplies under fire. Russia and Ukraine were forced into a temporary ceasefire by international pressure, but new alliances and persistent biothreats signaled a fractured world order.
The Caribbean remains a flashpoint for U.S.-Venezuela tensions, with U.S. carrier strike groups patrolling to secure oil routes, while Venezuela asserts sovereignty through aggressive naval moves. In 2025, a Venezuelan attempt to block a U.S. carrier strike group spiraled into disaster, igniting an unprecedented naval war. Below is the account, from a reckless blockade to an outcome that horrified the world. At dawn in 2025, amid a raging storm, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group sailed into international waters near Venezuela. A Venezuelan destroyer suddenly cut across its path, broadcasting demands to turn back. The Lincoln held formation, searchlights slicing through the rain. Tension crackled like electricity. Then, Venezuela fired a Yakhant anti-ship missile, the warhead streaking and slamming into the escort USS Chancellorsville, ripping open its flank in a massive explosion that sent a towering water column skyward. Alarms screamed, crews scrambled in panic, black smoke billowed. The Caribbean became a powder keg in seconds.
The U.S. retaliated instantly. F-35s from the Lincoln roared into the sky, engaging Venezuelan Su-30s in a storm of missiles. A Su-30 exploded mid-air, a brilliant fireball lighting the horizon. U.S. destroyers launched Harpoon missiles, tearing through the Venezuelan destroyer's deck in a sprawling inferno. Venezuela fired torpedoes from a lurking submarine, one striking another U.S. escort, metal and water erupting skyward. Seahawk helicopters dropped depth charges, shaking the ocean floor. Smoke and flames spread, the sea churning with explosions, turning the Caribbean into a chaotic war zone where every wave carried death.
The conflict surged into space with terrifying speed. Venezuela activated jamming satellites, blinding U.S. radar. The U.S. countered with anti-satellite weapons, obliterating a Venezuelan satellite, orbital debris cascading like a meteor shower. Combat drones from both sides clashed overhead, bursting into fireballs that lit the night. Venezuelan hypersonic missiles targeted the Lincoln, but U.S. laser defenses shot them down in dazzling beams of light. The war expanded as Cuba and Nicaragua joined, turning the Caribbean into a multinational flashpoint where missiles and black smoke shrouded everything.
Cuban and Nicaraguan ships rushed to support Venezuela, guns blazing in a naval free-for-all. U.S. destroyers fired Tomahawk missiles, leveling Venezuelan coastal batteries in earth-shaking blasts. A Venezuelan submarine surfaced, launching torpedoes that rocked a U.S. frigate. SEAL teams boarded Venezuelan vessels, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat on pitching decks. Spilled oil ignited, flames spreading to coastal fishing villages. Satellite imagery showed the Caribbean ablaze, marking a savage phase of warfare that engulfed the region.
The fallout triggered a global energy crisis. Caribbean oil routes were blocked, oil prices skyrocketed, and stock markets collapsed. An international coalition enforced sanctions, but Venezuelan hackers disrupted the U.S. power grid, causing widespread blackouts. Oil tankers faced pirate attacks, cargo looted in the chaos. The U.S. led a multinational effort to restore maritime security, but oil insurgent groups emerged. The war paused, but energy shortages and persistent threats signaled an unstable future.